That's what I got. I sent you a photo.
All right. Let me see something. Video has no sound. All right. That's cool. All right. Let me call you back in like 3 minutes. All right.
Okay.
All right. I got you. I ain't gonna hold you up.
Just take care of what you got to take care of.
All right. I got you.
Call me back later.
All right.
All right.
Hey, if you can hear me, I had a little technical difficulty. Thing frozen, so my bad if you hear my conversation or whatever. But I'm gonna go ahead here. Take it back. Right here. We'll finish it off. Hey, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue playing this video. I had a technical difficulty and the connection dropped, so I'm gonna replay it from the part I left off on. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick. All right. Go ahead and play that.
Masters probably wouldn't have been able to keep the slaves in line as well as they did without the house slaves. Being a house slave even became a goal for some of the slaves. They wanted to be able to come inside and become house slaves themselves. Now on top of that, the slave masters would also have babies with the house slaves. They would never be equal, but they were not the bottom class slaves that had nothing and had to work outside eating the scraps. I think you get the picture. And I think for the most part, everyone should understand what the house slaves were. Now here's the question I want you to think about. After slavery, and after they reprogrammed the slaves to believe that they were free, do you think that the position of house slave went away? What I'm asking is, do you think that the slave masters, those that were running and building this country, did away with the house slave position that allowed them to keep tabs and control of the Negro community by just controlling a small few of them? The answer should be no. But here's the problem. Whether you ever thought about that question or not, you probably have never been exposed to the how. You might just call out a few names that you've seen on television that were obviously cooning, and then you say, that's what a modern house slave is. But you probably still have not been fully exposed to the real answer. And that's what we're going to talk about. Here's the irony and obvious reprogramming of today. During the times of slavery, though there were a few slaves that wanted to become house slaves, the majority of the slaves despised the house slaves. They did not trust or like them. Now, fast forward to our current modern times. Today, we praise the house slaves, and they are now our heroes. It's because we have been reprogrammed and reconditioned to love and accept our chains. And the goals are now to get in the house instead of breaking free. It's really deep. But that brings us to talk about the boule. Within the ranks of the Masons were an educated, bourgeois class of black men that looked at themselves as elite compared to the rest of the other Masons. They wanted to be separated and distinguished from all the other Masons. And the ruling class of America, the elite families that were and still are the unseen hand of this world, they needed a source of recruitable Negroes to assist them with their plan to assimilate the Negroes into this new world that they were building. So there was a new subsection of the underground world of Negroes that was made to be the gatekeepers of Black America. And it is this point that you need to understand. I'll sum it up. Slaves were made free and then made citizens who were enticed by a dangling apple that looked like freedom and equality that they hoped for. And while they grew, the ruling class of America recruited a subsection of the Negro to be the gatekeepers and controllers of the rest of them. That's the summary. So let's keep moving. What I'm getting at, and I hope that you can see, is that in the praising of Martin Luther King Jr., we are all praising the house slave. So then, by definition and consequence, by following the house slave, you are actually only following his master's plan and agendas. You're following the master. So let me make this clear. As we go forward in this video, I will not be referring to Martin by that name, Martin Luther King Jr. I won't use that name. that name was used more of a gimmick or a marketing tool to liken him more to Martin Luther of the Protestant Reformation. His mama named him Michael. I'ma call him Michael. His name was Michael King Jr., and both of him and his daddy changed their names to bring about more effect. Now, I don't have any record of it, so I cannot say that he was a Freemason for certain. I'm sure there are others who have more knowledge that can confirm this or not. But I do know that his father, Michael Sr., was a Prince Hall Mason. And Michael Jr., again, was also a member of the Black Boule, which was another subsection of Masons, and he is called Reverend. So I do believe he was more likely a Mason, but this information has not been made readily available from my research for me to say certain, so I will not. But like I said, Michael was a Boule member, and he was given a great task of building a bridge for the American Negro to cross over into American Babylonian society. He represented himself as a Baptist minister of the faith of Jesus Christ that sought after equality for his people, but he was leading his people along with the rest of the world who believed in him. He was leading them to accept a path leading to a new world order. You see, many blacks in America were tired of being mistreated and living in a land that did not care for them. Many people wanted to either leave America or set up their own system within the country. One of the Boule's first roles in the country was to keep the professional blacks away from Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey started the grass movement. His idea was to make America start a settlement in Liberia to control rubber crops and other natural resources. He started a Back to Africa movement, and W.E.B. Du Bois, a Boule member, was tasked with stealing the black professionals from the influence of Garvey because it went against the ultimate agenda. You have to understand, they wanted the Negroes in this country to assimilate and find refuge within their government system, not to turn away from its influence. So they turned up the pressure, severely oppressing the black community, hosing them down, burning their houses and communities, beating and killing them. I mean, pure oppression. They moved in a goal of order out of chaos. So the more they increased the pressure, the more Michael's platform grew, because he was one that seemed to be getting things done. And he steered the conversation, leading us to a promised land that was not biblically inspired, though he portrayed himself as a minister of the gospel. But there is also an important point that was not known nor understood, or maybe brought to the attention of most people during this time. And because people were so oppressed and they were looking for a solution, what they were hearing at the time sounded credible to them. What I'm talking about is the social gospel. You see, the gospel was changed within the black church, and the people were no longer looking to be under the power of Yah and move for his kingdom come, but they were now working towards their own kingdom. This is a subject that I need to cover by itself. The social gospel movement is not something that started within the black church, though. It was a social reform movement that gained traction in the United States after the Civil War. And this is important if you're going to understand what happened here. The advocates of this movement interpreted the kingdom of God as requiring social as well as individual salvation, and sought the betterment of industrialized society through application of the biblical principles of charity and justice. The social gospel emphasized how the ethical teachings of Jesus could fix the problems caused by Gilded Age capitalism. Social gospel movement leaders took Yahusha's message of love thy neighbor into pulpits, published books, and lectured about it all across the country. Other leaders, mostly women, ran settlement houses designed to reduce the suffering of immigrants living in cities like Boston, New York, and Chicago. Their mission was to draw attention to the problems of poverty and inequality, especially in America's growing cities. After their attention to the problem, the churches then showed a humane solution through their social gospel: order out of chaos. Charles Sheldon, a minister of Topeka, Kansas, explained the idea behind the social gospel in his 1897 novel, In His Steps. He argued, to be a Christian, one needed to walk in Jesus' footsteps. The book's slogan, and I'm sure you heard of it, "What would Jesus do?" became a central theme of the social gospel movement, which also became tied to a belief in what Ohio minister Washington Gladden called social salvation. This concept emphasized that religion's fundamental purpose was to create systemic changes in American political structures. So because of this, the social gospel leaders supported legislation for an 8-hour workday, the abolition of child labor, and government regulation of business monopolies, among other policies. The social gospel is a gospel that a man like John D. Rockefeller held on to very closely, and modern men like Trump hold on to as well. That's why they don't seek for forgiveness. They just try to be a good person, do what Jesus did.
But have you ever asked God for forgiveness? I'm not sure I have. I just go and try and do a better job from there. I don't think so. I think if I do something wrong, I think I just try and make it right. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't. Now,
you see, through this social gospel, they were not moving according to what the word said. They adopted the word to fit it into their lives and their causes. Through this, the purpose of the faith was not for Yah's will to be done, but to create systemic changes in America and then the world. And it is from this social gospel that the gospel in America was subtly changed. Yeah, people were preaching about Jesus, but the purpose of the kingdom of heaven had changed to creating a more perfect system on earth for the inhabitants through their own political power. They were trying to create heaven on earth. And this social gospel was spread amongst the masses for a century. They would preach about Jesus, but in turn, they would also preach about what would Jesus do in terms of our social roles. Moving for governments to create programs to feed the sick and take care of the poor. And in turn, moved our focus of reliance away from focusing on the power of Yah to focusing on the power of moving our governments and our leaders. This is how socialism and communism is created. And this social gospel was no different within the Black church. This is how the mega churches came about. The Mount Olivettes in Chicago and the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. People like Boulay member Adam Clayton Powell used their pulpits to promote their social gospel. You must understand that this was a major movement that was accepted amongst the American church. It joined a political message and tied it with the gospel, and it is still present to this day. This is what the gospel in America has been tied to, and it should be a missing link of connection to why many people that are actually reading their Bibles today feel a lack of attachment to the modern day church. There's so much I can say with this, but it deserves a video on its own. The point is that during this time, they were working towards a social gospel. It was already well programmed in the established white churches in the country. This is how the churches became so political, and why being a Christian was so important for an elected official. It's because they were tying in their belief in Jesus and what he said about taking care of the poor and disenfranchised, and they tied it in to how the government should work. And then the Black churches latched on and accepted this social gospel because of how poorly they were being treated. And then they looked for leaders to lead the charge in bringing in the promised land in America. The Black church was not about the true gospel and Yah's kingdom come. They were about their own kingdom. And this is again the missing link in the churches today. They are not applying Yah's word in full. They are using pieces of scripture to show how to obtain the world for yourself individually and collectively as a group. But going back, during those times, people were looking at a figure like Michael King as a sort of Moses. And he was bringing Black people into the promised land. But this land that he was referring to had nothing to do with Yah's word, but based on reinterpretations supporting their social gospel. An important messenger of this social gospel was a man named Howard Thurman. He wrote a book called Jesus and the Disinherited. If you want to understand the social gospel, you should read that book. It is a hard book to read because of the obvious misinterpretations of biblical doctrine. This book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was an important and influential book whose message helped shape the civil rights movement. It was said many times by many people that Michael King often traveled with this book from Mr. Thurman.
People like Martin Luther King Jr., who reads the book, we know shortly after it was published.
Martin Luther King Jr. always traveled with Jesus and the Disinherited. I mean, he'd clean underwear, shirt, and he'd have Howard Thurman in his briefcase. And he read Howard Thurman for inspiration.
It is this book that had a profound impact on his beliefs. In the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr., on page 351, there is a quote from Michael that says, "We have the power to change America and give a kind of new vitality to the religion of Jesus Christ. And we can get those young men and women who've lost faith in the church to see that Jesus was a serious man precisely because he dealt with the tang of the human amid the glow of the divine, and that he was concerned about their problems. He was concerned about bread. He opened and started Operation Breadbasket a long time ago. He initiated the first sit-in movement, the greatest revolutionary that history has ever known. And when people tell us when we stand up that we got our inspiration from this or that, go back and let them know where we got our inspiration. I read Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto years ago when I was a student in college, and many other revolutionary movements in the world came into being as a result of what Marx talked about. The great tragedy is that Christianity failed to see that it had the revolutionary edge. You don't have to go to Karl Marx. I got it from a man named Jesus, a Galilean saint who said he was anointed to heal the brokenhearted. He was anointed to deal with the problems of the poor. And that is where we get our inspiration. And we go out in a day when we have a message for the world, and we can change this world, and we can change this nation. You see, what I'm trying to display is that this message from Michael was not inspired by Yah. He just used interpretations of certain aspects of Messiah and then tailored it to an overall message of a promised land of equality and justice for all. And when he spread this message amongst an abused, oppressed generation that was just looking for help, they really believed that this was about Yah because the name of Jesus was brought in. But this promised land that he was bringing them to was not the wonderful one that was prophesied by Yah, but it was the other prophecy by Yah of this coming new world order. The desire for equality, no matter who you are, what you believe, and who you love. You see, part of that promised land that King helped deliver was in that landmark Civil Rights and Labor Law Bill passed in 1964. It outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, and later included sexual orientation and gender identity. This is why his speeches and his content and movement have been used many times on issues away from racial justice. I remember during the years of Obama how people like Al Sharpton used Michael King's teaching to promote LGBT agendas.
Stand up. Dr. King made history because he did. It is time for all of us across races, across religions, across beliefs, gender, and preferences to stand up like Dr. King. We have humanity at stake.
Like I said earlier, I just saw it the other day when Zelensky gave his speech to Congress that he invoked Martin Luther King. Martin's dream of equality and justice had nothing to do with biblical teachings and biblical truth, but they had everything to do with the acceptance and equality of all, regardless of race, sexual orientation, and most of all, religion. It is a general acceptance because the promotion is that we are all God's children, so we should all accept each other. And because this message was so effectively delivered, and most people don't have a strong biblical understanding, when you hear something that goes against his message, they want to label it as hate. It has created the label that the truth of Yah's word is hate speech. You see, it's far deeper than not accepting people because of their skin color, or their religious background, or sexual orientation. It's actually about bringing the world together, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, your nation. It's about bringing the world together under one roof, a one world system, because we're all God's children. But they had to come with the equality message first to lay the foundation of where we are currently today. And Michael King's unmatched promotion of the social gospel was a huge piece in driving the world towards change, because instead of having to re-articulate the message, they can just always invoke his spirit of change. They can always go back to his message and say that they are trying to fulfill his dream. All this is important to identify because the mental conditioning surrounding this is highly guarded and it's used, like I said, consistently. When people are promoting the gospel, you must be very mindful of their words because there are adjustments and twists that are used in order to push an agenda under the covering of false religious values you think that you believe in. This is used very often.
Thank you, dear Lord, because we're reminded of what you said on the cross, that it is finished. Injustice is finished. Jogging while black is finished. Racially profiled is finished. Mandatory minimums is finished.
Most people around the world are tied into a social gospel, which has allowed politics to be played out in the pulpits. People are trying to form their own worlds instead of yielding to Yah's and allowing His will to be done. You will notice that the social gospel and all the rhetoric surrounding it doesn't even give a yielding to Bible prophecy, because to them it has nothing to do with it. That's why we don't hear much about end times Bible prophecy in the churches, because they are all about setting up their own kingdom on earth through their own power. Michael King was used to introduce a new path to equality that ties the whole world together. He will always be invoked because his premise was a major program for the world to fall under. You should even expect the Antichrist to bring up Michael King's dream. Michael King was absolutely a controlled agent. That is why you see him in pictures with the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. This is why you see a whole monument of him in the District of Columbia. It's why all these satanic world leaders invoke his spirit when speaking on agendas that are coming forward in this world, leading towards a new world order. They chose Michael King not because he had a non-violent approach, but because he was able to lead a flock effectively into an ultimate trap that would leave people under mental oppression for many generations to come. And people from around the world, whether white, black, Asian, Hispanic, etc., they all could resonate and accept his message because though it mentioned Jesus, it was never truly about him. His message is the foundation of the world that they're creating, and they just add to it when they need to. As he ended his speech with Jew and Gentile, Protestant and Catholic,
We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
You see, those words were acceptable language in the 1960s. But today, as tolerance of more has grown, they have included other faiths like Islam in. They have included gender equality and sexual orientation in. It was all a part of his dream.
We are the dream keepers, which is why we come today black and white and all races and religions and sexual orientations to say this dream is still alive. You might have killed the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream because truth crushed the earth.
The dream, again, was the foundation on which they have built upon, and that's why they celebrate him. What happened in the acceptance of his dream is that many people walked away from the power of Yah and never turned back. They felt like the power was in their hands to change the world, instead of waiting on Yah to do so and being his vessel. You see, I'm certain that there are many people that have not actually read their Bibles, but then they feel that they actually know what is said in it. And it is those people that probably don't see anything wrong with the social gospel, because they don't know the true purpose of Messiah and what our Creator intends for this world. This is mind control that needs to be broken and stepped away from. But it has to be something that is even acknowledged is there. When this mind control was coming on the scene, it was a very serious time. We're talking about the consistent oppression of a group of people that was happening during a period of time when television became more prominent, allowing more people to see what was once done before in a vacuum, unseen. And people wanted change, and Michael King came to deliver it. It was the same exact script that they ran when Obama took office. And again, it was both white and black that accepted it. And then Obama took King's message and added the next leg, bringing us to the door of the New World Order. Remember what I said of King's ending in 1960s? Jew and Gentile, Protestant and Catholic?
It is now our generation's task to carry on what those pioneers began. For our journey is not complete until our wives, our mothers, and daughters can earn a living equal to their efforts. Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well.
You can see how Obama added the next leg of tolerance, inclusion, and acceptance. That's why Obama was claiming to be working to fulfill King's dream. But Obama said, the dream is not fully realized yet. And that time will not fully come until the world unites under one world religion. The Bible has been used as a weapon against humanity, all because people that believe in it don't read it, while they listen to people who also don't read it, but manipulate it to fit within their agendas. If you were attaching yourself to these agendas, you are not following the gospel found in the scriptures, but a manipulated agenda that leads to the Antichrist and a one world religion. They want to pursue a utopia full of what they deem as love, but it comes at the price of canceling out the influence and say of the Most High. And they use this dream of Michael King in order to sell it. They've attached people to the social gospel while not allowing people to realize the difference between the good news of the scriptures and what they are advocating for. They are putting a religious spin on political goals and movements. The truth of the scriptures has nothing to do with their social gospel. This social gospel leads to communism, of which Michael King was a very well documented student of. Though he never publicly classified himself as a communist, his ideals and what he was striving for all lead to communism, like his advocating for a guaranteed universal basic income and also a redistribution of wealth.
We are dealing with hard economic and social issues, and it means that the job is much more difficult. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income. It's much easier.
We must also realize that the problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
There is much that goes along with all this, but it may need to be readdressed, Elohim willing, as he leads. What is abundantly clear is that people cannot put their spiritual relationships with the Most High in the hands of other people. This social gospel has been a real virus that has spread amongst the church, and now people are not able to properly apply the scriptures. They don't understand the spiritual battles that we face. They don't understand how politics has nothing to do with any of this. They don't know how to put trust in the Most High instead of putting it into this fake political system. It's how people like Biden can go to the churches and gain popularity and political strength. It's because he's supported by Freemason pastors that push a social gospel that is very different than what the scriptures say. I have a basic rule that anyone that uses the title Reverend should never be followed, because that title goes along with Freemasonry and their worshipful master title. Either way, we must stop attaching ourselves to the world and the false pastors and false doctrines. And it needs to be called out and identified. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 11 says, "And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light." Ephesians chapter 5 verses 11 through 13. You see, they have been masquerading the truth and hiding their darkness, making it seem as light. And the truth is that every day that you feel that the world is getting closer to their promised land actually means the further away the world is moving away from the Most High, which is why it seems that the world is so far from Yah today. When we see these pastors and churches demanding all these political actions and putting politics at the pulpit, please understand this is the social gospel, and it is a part of Michael King's dream that was not given to him. I said not given to him by the Most High. As the Apostle Peter wrote in 2 Peter chapter 1 verses 19 through 21, let me repeat it to you. "And so we have the prophetic word confirmed, which you do well to heed as a light that shines in a dark place, until the day dawns and the brilliance arises in your hearts. Knowing this first, then no prophecy of Scripture is of any
All right. So basically, I hope you liked the video. I'm gonna play the whole thing because some people ain't watching like that. But it's all good though. It's all love, you know. And it is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. And I hope y'all like the video. People gonna get a chance to see the video. Hopefully, look in your inbox. I said, I want to say I was live, but I just want to share that information with you. It's powerful information. I listened to it last night at work, and I just thought about it. I want to go ahead and share it out to people to see it, and I hope you like the video, watch the video, enjoy it. And you can go on the website, truthunited.com. And you can also go on YouTube, type in Truth United. He got lots of great videos. Him and AOC, I think, Lion. I'll try to get one of his videos again next time. So a couple of those guys, I get their videos off of YouTube, and I just put the videos out here on Facebook. But I could have converted it and whatever, but a lot of things going on in this world that we gotta look at and don't forget that it's taking place around us. I'm not trying to say being a conspiracy theory, I'm not trying to get into that lane, but I just want to show you some biblical things and see how it takes on the world the way it is and how things are being played out. But at the end of the day, I hope you enjoyed the video. Peace. Have a good night. God bless. I'm out.